This morning I had a great chat with a guy called Leo Biddle. He runs a charity in Borneo where he looks after great apes. And it's quite interesting. You might think, well, what's this got to do with 91 Divock? Well, I'm just going to show you now two screenshots from his Twitter page. And yeah, it's quite interesting. So I'll do that now. So that blows a big hole through the narrative of people catching things, doesn't it? Anyway, we had a chat for 30, 40 minutes or so, and we talked about some pretty interesting things. For example, applied psychology. So why did so many people go along with things that were complete nonsense? Dynamics of groupthink. We talked about education too and its role in promoting groupthink. So that was quite interesting from my point of view as a former teacher. Leo's a pretty, well, very bright guy, and it was quite interesting to hear about his school experiences. And the final thing that we talked about was his quite interesting encounters with what can only be described as dark satanic forces. You know, that actually impacted on his own day-to-day life. We also decided to have another chat, and next time we're going to be talking about how best to wake up normies. Leo thinks it's possible, and after he sort of explained some of the ideas, I definitely think it's possible too. So that's coming next week. But without much more of ado, this is the interview with Leo. So I hope you enjoy it. Leo, thanks a lot for coming on and agreeing to have a chat. So we'll talk about lots of different things here, but I think the first thing to ask is what took you to Bali? Because that's where you are now.
Borneo.
Borneo, sorry.
Yeah, so I work in great ape conservation. So I run well, initially an orangutan charity, but then I winded in the mandate to deal with any endangered wildlife species found in Borneo. So we do a lot of work with bears, various different primate species, everything really in Borneo, apart from cats and dogs.
So what sort of took you there? How did that all come about?
I originally went as a consultant, I guess, unpaid, but I basically got a free holiday to offer my advice to a group that I'd encountered at a number of conferences. They were just started working in the part of Borneo that I'm speaking to you from now. And they had an MOU with the government, but they were finding it very difficult, and they were getting ready to shut their project. And they asked, is a kind of last ditch effort, could you come in, offer some advice? I did. I didn't really like their product at all. I felt it was really just about making money rather than actually trying to make a difference. Although, I mean, the individuals involved wanted to make a difference, but they were just a little bit naive, out of their depth. And I kind of gave my assessment back to them very fairly and said, to be honest, I think you should shut it. But while here, I met with some government officers. I don't know why they were taken with me, because I'm quite direct. I just speak my mind, and that can be a little rude in Asia, to be honest. And I've basically gone around the center and gone, that's terrible, that's terrible. I wouldn't do that.
Sorry, Leo. So what does you said MOU? What does that mean?
Oh, sorry, a memorandum of understanding. So it's a thing than a contract. It's like a letterhead rather than an agreement, rather than a formal contract. And then let's call them an NGO that was previously here said, yeah, you're right, it's not working. But then they said, well, do you want to take it over and move it in the direction you want to? And in the short time I'd been here, I'd started looking after a couple of animals, two bears and an orangutan. And I realized that if I left, these animals would be highly likely to die. So I was like, oh, well, yeah, look, I'll stay on for 6 weeks. And then it's almost definitely the busiest rescue center on the island. And there's a lot of wildlife moving on, regrettably. Animal conflict, illegal trade over here. So in the 6 weeks that I'd agreed to stay just to get a feel for things, I had this constant drip, drip, drip of like, here's a porcupine, here's a pangolin, there's 10 monkeys. And I then was like, okay, naively, I thought if I gave it 6 months, I could fix all the problems in Borneo. I was a much younger man then. Not all the problems, but, I would be able to sort of put something in place. But then by the end of those 6 months, I just had so many animals that I was feeding out of my own pocket. And it's like, okay, something else needs to happen. Then I established a volunteering program where people paid to come over, not work with the animals, because actually my main criticism of what was happening before is a kind of paid to play. The, you know, baby orangutan bottle feed. It's like, well, it's never going to go back to if they're intersecting with lots of humans. But then got the volunteers involved in doing different things like building enclosures, working around the animals I knew could not be released. And it just grew from there. Over the 19 years I've been here, I built 12 nonprofit businesses, which I really used to fund both my charity and other local regional charities, some cat and dog charities, some children's charities. And I don't know if you know about local economies. I just like this idea of building enough businesses that interfaced with each other that I could recycle the money through them or complement each other. Like I make cats, for example, and I used to own a couple of bars. I would cut the glass bottles from the bar because there's no glass recycling here, and then upcycle it to a candle holder for soy wax.
This is all good. So, Leo, what got you into sort of animals? Like, how did you get into? Were you interested in animals as a kid, or did you do any qualifications? Or
I studied zoology, but I can honestly say that I don't think education helped one bit. You know, some of the books that I read helped, but they were really books that I'd read on my own time. Maybe a few of them were on the syllabus, but no, I mean, I learned quite quickly that I started working with animals, that what I was taught in university is just wrong on lots of levels, you know, or not necessarily wrong, but belongs in a teaching room, not in a jungle where you're actually dealing with the things, you know. For example, my thesis, I think you'd call it, the final year project that you do at university, I think, dissertation, that was the word that I was looking for. Was on DNA profiling of bushmeat so that you could, you know, work out if it was wild caught. And as a student, I thought, this would be really useful if I get a job in conservation. Then you come over here. No one has the money for DNA testing of dead animals, let alone live animals. You know, you're struggling to feed things. You're trying to raise money for staff. So it's a nice idea and might be useful in America, but not really useful in any way in the developing world.
Yeah. So that's something that we could sort of talk about, really, because I used to be a teacher. I taught economics for 35 years before I kind of ditched it because I wasn't prepared to comply with all the biomedical fascism that was happening. But what type of person do you think does well at school or does well through university and the education system?
Yeah, well, I watched that video of yours and a couple of others that you sent and very much agree with that. Critical thinking's punished. I mean, so when I was young, I got suspended and expelled from an awful lot of schools and was deemed a troublemaker, was eventually kind of institutionalized, I guess would be the best way of saying it, sent to a special school when I was 11. And I had been getting in huge amounts of trouble at school, but never violent, not at all, never drugs or anything like that. But I just had a lot of questions, and it made me a very disruptive influence. And even though I would get in trouble, you know, quite a lot, detentions, you know, you can't keep asking questions about the moon landing. You can't question what we're telling you. And it's like, but I have so many questions, you know, it's like this makes sense as you're telling it. And I actually, before I was sent to the special school, I was state appointed, sent to see these child psychiatrists who were diagnosing me with all of these, you know, bizarre sort of conditions, I would say, and absolutely adamant that I was being abused by my father, which absolutely is not even remotely the case. And I would just get angry with them and say, how dare you say that about my father or about me? But then got profiled as a deeply disturbed, you know, individual. It's like, I think I'm quite bright.
Because you were asking questions.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, academically, I've always done very well. Like, I know the answers they want to the test. So if I want to pass the test to make my parents happy as a child, I'll go, fine, I'll get an A in your test. I still don't agree with it. And
so I think nowadays, Leo, it probably would be a lot harder because, well, I'm 59, but I can remember at that time, with A levels in particular, the questions sometimes they would often be a bit broader, and there'd be different ways of answering the same question, and you had better qualified people marking the papers, whereas these days it's the questions often the exam papers, they're passing off the examiner's subjective opinion as an objective fact, and unless you hug their consensus, you just don't get any marks at all. They'll just mark it wrong. If it's not on the mark scheme and it's a valid point, they won't give you any marks at all. But I think many teachers, they actually say that they like questions, but the actual truth is the opposite. As soon as students start asking questions, then the big problems happen for the student.
Absolutely. Well, case in point, I remember in my biology A-level paper, there was a question on Jurassic Park saying, whilst this is fiction, it seems this technology might be soon, to become available.
Yeah.
I can't remember the part of the question, but, it was a big chunk of the paper writing how you would perfect, bringing dinosaurs back, with DNA spices. And you're like, I have so many questions at this point.
Yeah. Can I answer your question with a question?
Yeah, but if I my genuine thoughts, even as a teenager, I'm sure I would have failed biology A level.
Yeah, but I suppose where I'm going with this is that, given what's happened in the education system, we shouldn't be too surprised about what happened in 2020.
Yeah. Well, I think, I've been saying for a long time that I think the menticide is more damaging than the atricide. And this outsourcing our thinking to digital devices. An example I often give when I talk to guests is that I remember going to pubs when I was a teenager with my friends, and we would have these fierce debates, not arguments, but we would be trying to work out the truth about something. How does lightning, occur or something like that? And many times it would spark, differing opinions, but we're trying to move the conversation forward and enhance our understanding. But frequently, I'm a bit of a geek, would then lead me going to a library and reading a book, against my opinion, pro my opinion, and trying to find out the thing in between. And some of my more, interested friends, we would go and try and solve these debates and find answers. Now, if you tried the same thing, probably the person that would think the least would be the one that would pull their phone out and go, hang on, I've already got the answer. Google told me. Wear a mask.
Yeah. That's it. So it's this sort of, I think this is another thing that the education system's done. It's encouraged people to make these appeals to authority as a substitute for a logical argument. It's like no one's really interested in logical deduction or induction. It's just like, oh, somebody above me in the hierarchy says that this is the truth, therefore it must be the truth because they're higher up in the hierarchy than me. Defer to authority.
The institutions, but individuals at large, have become more and more sort of hurt by being wrong. Whereas I welcome it when I'm wrong. I probably am wrong about an awful lot of, questions I have in my mind over the last 4 years. But I welcome being shown wrong. And I have some quite hard lines. But if someone could come up and say, you're wrong, and then answer questions, and I then decide I am wrong, because I'm very open to being wrong on things, I would happily change my opinion and maybe be embarrassed about some of the strongly held opinions I've had over the last 4 years because I've been shouting them quite loudly, but I would own it. I would say, I have enhanced my knowledge and now, I want you to keep 6 feet away from me or something like that. People can't do that. And we saw this, with this extreme virtue signaling and this, the Dunning-Kruger effect, that those that know the least are the most confident, and those that know the most are actually doubt their own knowledge to a certain degree. Or certainly wouldn't come out and say, I know everything. But we were met with emotion when we tried to deliver debate or logic or facts. One could argue there are facts, but say, here is some evidence. Would you mind discussing it? You're a murderer. You're an idiot. And I do think I had a chat with someone some time ago, and they made the point. So this isn't my idea, but that even people that I knew, I run quite a busy charity. An awful lot of people knew me. And generally speaking, if I only spoke about animals and orangutan in the time they were with us, which is what I would mostly talk about, most people go away and think, well, Leo's quite an intelligent individual. He certainly knows a lot about science, certainly knows a lot about, wildlife and conservation. And generally, without, puffing up an ego, I would receive these compliments frequently, like, wow, this is one of the most interesting conversations or experiences I've had. But then a lot of people started attacking me on social media. Well, I was banned from social media for about 2 years. But when I finally came back on, I got out of the naughty. there were some people, particularly former staff of mine, that were like, you're an idiot. And I want to have compassion for everyone. And this was done to their thinking. But I think it made it very easy for people that might have been coming from a lower, arguably intelligence base or knowledge base to feel superior over someone that is genuinely quite remarkable, read and versed in my subjects, that they could in an instant say, oh, well, you're an idiot, and then feel like they were smarter than so-and-so. None more so than doctors and vets that would attack me. It's like, I remember training you. Yeah, it's when you first joined me, just 1 year or 2 years out of veterinary school, you were clueless, and it was my experience that took you there, or to the level that they went. So yeah, I think there was a lot of that.
I think that's something that I've also noticed too. This emotional response rather than a response based on logic and reasoning. And if I'm being honest, I think I saw that well before what I call the people's pantomime. In the teaching profession, you have these sort of Overton windows of acceptability and various topics. And if anyone strayed outside of that Overton window, then the response was anger. It was an emotional response. So go on, sorry, Leo.
Well, they don't necessarily mind if you're inside the Overton window. And it's like you said, it's stepping out saying, I reject both premises, or I don't have an opinion. I need more information. Then you're the enemy. You're othered straight away. Sorry.
No. So I was going to say, do you think it would be too harsh to say that many people don't even think? All they do is listen and repeat from higher up in the hierarchy, because that's something that I've been floating around in my mind, is that it's an unfortunate realization, but I've come to that realization that many people just do not think at all. All they do is listen, and then they learn what the kind of in vogue thing, the socially acceptable thing to say or do is, and then they just repeat it. Is that harsh?
It's harsh but fair. I think we've seen it, predating the pantomime of late, or the people's pantomime, as you call it. We saw that around certain sort of sexual mores and some bizarre ideation about biology and make believe, making things real all of a sudden. So yeah, it does predate it. It's changed in my lifetime. I'm 47. I think you could have far more intelligent conversations, although I was aware of it even at that young age. At about 6, I started looking around me when there was major narratives in the world that I was starting to comprehend and say, well, this doesn't make sense, and people just look at me like I was mental, I mean, I guess you're familiar with NPC theory, or the lack of an
yeah.
I have a hesitance, although there is a strong case to be made, and I've had many conversations with alternative thinkers about it, where they will advance it. I worry that this non-thinking people, or NPCs, it has shades of eugenical thinking to me. It's like, what, I'm better than these people? I prefer to think and want to have faith in other people around me, that this is a procedure that was done to them. Perhaps akin to John Taylor Gatto's, education really being indoctrination. I would go a lot further than he went. I mean, obviously, he was a product of his time.
Well, certainly, what I would say, Leo, just to clarify my position, is that I'm a libertarian, so I believe in, I don't know, John Stuart Mill's harm principle. So long as your behaviour isn't physically harming somebody else, that's fine. But if you're joining in with biomedical fascism, then I think any criticism I have of you for joining in with that tyranny, I think it's fair play. You're worthy of being criticised if you're denying people a participation in society through some kind of mad groupthink. I mean, and then the other thing that I would say too is just I don't know where you are spiritually, but for me, I definitely believe in free will. I think we're all born with free will, and I think.
So I wouldn't describe myself as religious. I would have described myself as not militant atheist at all, but very much thought of myself as a scientist, believed in a mechanistic universe, had made my peace with death and becoming worm food, but didn't really consider there was anything much more. And I think this is appropriate for the channel. in about end of March, April 2020, as you know, an atheist who thought I was worm food, I think I saw the devil. And that's a wake-up call. So I'm not quite sure what that will take.
Yeah, no, go on, talk. Please talk about that. Please talk about that.
Well, I think this I came to see. I came to have a belief. I noticed my language was changing when I was talking to people. I kept saying, "This is demonic. This is evil," and it was like, "Why am I? You know, I don't even necessarily believe in these terms." But then I perceived a manifest evil in the world, moving through the hearts and minds of men, and definitely moving through digital communication. And it's like the best word for this is Satan. You know, in my vocabulary, my language, and I also recognized in myself that I'm vehemently opposed, in violent opposition towards anything that I consider now to be evil, or were perhaps, I mean, I would have used it before, but now I would use it with a capital E. This corruption of what we are, this corruption of morality, this inversion in many ways of morality. And then, of course, if you start believing in the devil, you start hoping that there's something else. So in many ways, the real positive I can see from all the horror of the last 4 years is I came into 2020 with 0% confidence that I had an immortal soul. Now I'm at least 50-50. You know, it's like it's positive. That's a massive positive. And just even if I'd have been 1%, I would be absolutely sure that I would focus on my actions in this. I mean, I've always been tried to be a moral person, but even if there's just a 1% chance, and to be honest, I'm over 50% chance that my life means more than feeding worms. Why would you ever compromise your integrity or morality, no matter how bad it gets? Even if the gates of hell were to open, I would actually be cheerful. It's like, great, I'll grab a sword and I'll head towards it because there's a power greater than me. If there's so
I agree, Leo.
I do struggle with a lot of the religions because I see that a lot of people are interacting. Their architecture of reality is based on the stories that they believe, almost as though there's a story-based simulacrum, a subjective reality that has been superimposed over objective reality, and people are living in that, and it roughly matches their understanding of the world. So a cognitive dissonance pops up when something's not objectively true, and they're happy running with that. But I just see that religion could be used as a tool for controlling people. It's the ultimate story.
I think it definitely has. I think organized religion is the work of the devil, but that's not to say that the teachings of Jesus Christ, we can express it in terms of natural law, because I think the programming has been so harsh that people now associate Jesus Christ with Justin Welby or the Pope in Rome in his hall in the shape of a snake's head.
Yeah.
And the two, I often use this analogy. It's like people have been fed Brussels sprouts and they've been told that they've been eating strawberries. And then somebody comes along and says, "Oh, do you like strawberries?" And so, "Oh, no, I hate them." They've done like a switch. But if you actually go back and look at the foundations of what Jesus actually said, or even just the 10 Commandments, I challenge anybody to sort of say that they would disagree with any of those foundation blocks. Go on.
No, I would very much agree. I think I read all of the religious books when I was too young and didn't have life experience because I wanted to believe in a God. It's there in the frame of reference. So I read the Bible, but then was aware there were other religions. So I then read the Quran, the Pali Canon.
Yeah.
I'm this before I'm 10, probably not old enough to really, deal with these larger concepts. But then I was confused with like, well, they can't all be wrong. And why would one group of people go to hell? That doesn't seem just. And I think I threw the God baby, not that God's a baby, out with the religion bathwater. But yeah, I mean, certainly one look at the Catholic Church, particularly of late, but even going back, that's enough to put people off, one religion.
So it's just been corrupted. It's just been corrupted. But the fundamental message of like, don't murder people, don't steal other people's stuff, don't lie to people, don't try to deceive people. Whether you want to, I think the conclusion that I'm coming towards is, for many people who are atheists or agnostics, the best thing to do is to come at them from the idea of natural law, because it doesn't have these associations with Justin Welby or the Pope. And I think you've got a better chance of getting through to people. Because I think ultimately, at the end of the day, it's all about what we do in our lives. I think for me, life is about a test. It's a test of us, and what matters is our actions, what we say or or don't say, or what we do, or what we should have done but didn't do. And I think that life is a test. I think that's just where I am. But
it certainly appears to be. And there's some weird coincidences that pop up when you start understanding that test, these moral choices. I think we're all born with a moral compass. And, for me, the question then is, from whence do these morals come? It isn't from a pond out here. But what you mentioned earlier on, I think, is the most undiscussed topic, or maybe I've been listening to the wrong speakers: free will. I mean, wasn't this really the ultimate free will test? And as scary as it looked, I tend not to get scared. I've found that getting angry in response to something fearful takes the fear away. But also, I'm quite obstinate. If someone pushes me, tells me to do something, I'm just going to double down and say no if I think it's morally unjust. But as scary as it looked, we're all going to get dragged off to FEMA camps. And I can tell you that no one is talking about what happened in the developing world. We're obsessed about how harsh Canada was, how hard it was in Australia. I'm like, check out Asia. The trauma that's been done here, full military deployments. Like, I've looked down the barrel of more guns, in the last 4 years than I have in the entirety of my life, and quite tense encounters for refusing to play along with the pantomime. But ultimately, nothing bad happened. Even when I was told I couldn't travel, I never worn the mask. I didn't take the injections, and I refused to take the test. And I was ready to get bounced off with the flights. But within a week of the flights restarting, I noticed that when you booked it, or the booking form, it didn't ask you if you've been injected. It's like, well, then I'll be able to get my money back. So I booked a ticket to go back to England, was told on every step of the way, you cannot get on this plane. You have to wear a mask. You have to take a test. And politely at first, although I did, raise my voice multiple times, was like, I don't play this game. Step aside or refund. And then ultimately, sometimes only 5 minutes before the plane took off, they're like, all right, get on the plane then. It was a free will test, and people failed.
They did fail, and I think something you brought out there, Leo, is something that I wanted to talk about with you. Is that this evil that goes on in the world? I'm becoming more and more certain of this. That they're only allowed to inflict evil on us if we consent to it.
Yeah,
I don't know what you think about that.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I might go a bit woo-woo with you if it's okay. It's touching on these matters. I became really angry. I was in the first few months of lockdown because I could see the harm that it was going to cause to the elderly, particularly. I mean, that was the people being allowed to die alone. I could see there was a lot of fraud going on. So it was just, there's holes still in the walls of my house. I was just like alternating between grief and rage, not for myself, but for something needs to be done. And I started talking to some priests who initially were going along with it. I sought out bomas, which are like witch doctors here. It's like, if there is a manifest evil, put me in front of it. Because I don't want to hurt humans, but I have this huge urge to fight. And I started having bizarre encounters with, I guess you call them, like in English, like crackheads or clearly homeless, demented people coming around. I've never experienced this before. I mean, there aren't meth heads, around here, coming around, speaking in tongues, provoking me almost to kill. Not kill, but to fight them. And it was a good friend who's a priest that talked me down from that. He was very open. He's like, you're saying you want to be put in front of demons. This is popping up. Don't let your anger turn to wrath. Which I hadn't really considered. And I realized it was overboiling for me. But he also said, touching on what you mentioned, our consent or agreeing to it, it had got to quite a tense stage where one particular meth head kept breaking into my house, set some fires on the property, built little rock cairns, and drew a pentagram in my lawn out of rocks. I was like, well, this is a test. Like, it appears to be possible vessel that's being inhabited. But the priest told me not to strike it, not to give in to that anger. If there is a possessing force, I don't know if there is or not, I'm open to it. It's like, it doesn't care about the vessel. It's doing it to taunt you. So if you kill that vessel or harm it, then maybe you'll get arrested and go to prison. And I had a very standoff with this thing. And this person is a human being, a very unfortunate human being, and was just like, no, I'm not afraid of you, and I'm not going to hurt you. Just leave.
I'd say another thing as well there, Leo, is that people often say, oh, well, how, if God exists, how come bad things are allowed to happen, like what you've just described? And I think it's a perfect example that God was also allowing those people, those druggies, to test you. And the test in this case is, are you going to do what Jesus said and turn the other cheek and not go to like leather this guy or incapacitate him? So I think that
Yeah.
that's my interpretation of what's going on.
It was a good lesson, and it did help. I was struggling so much with my anger that I was feeling there might be a violent outburst towards authority, rather than just some, lunatic homeless person. But it did help me keep that in check and avoid going down the path of wrath.
But I think this is one of the things that we need to do to try to get out of this, is that, again, I'm coming to the conclusion that, is there much point in trying to change unthinking NPCs who just respond to logic with emotion? So it's unfortunate, but I'm just coming to the conclusion that it's not really possible. The only thing that you can change is yourself. So to try to make the right decisions ourselves and be a good exemplar of in how we live our life and how we talk to people.
I think that's the most important work, for sure. But I do also think we can still pull some people out. A lot of the people that would say that you can't reach them, I have reached the odd one. And I feel like I exited Plato's cave a long time ago, but I keep going back in. There's others that are struggling. And if we can help them have that moment of realization.
Leo, please tell me how you managed to get through to any one of these people.
I've got a good understanding of psychology, and you don't attack where the propaganda is reinforcing a narrative. So talking about the pantomime, the people's pantomime, was not a winning solution. The emotion kicks in, and then all of the cognition behind it goes to defend the framing emotion. And the ego is tied to that. And the ego is very fragile. It doesn't like to be hurt. It doesn't like to die. So I would just take them through thought experiments. I saw a video where you did some on narratives that aren't so touchy. I have very strong opinions about the moon landings. I have since I was 6 years old. I would say that was my wake-up moment. But I found, people know there's something going on, but if you defend them on a certain narrative, you're arguing with their emotion, or you're arguing with the TV, and it's the TV that talks back through the person. So actually, I used to own a couple of bars. I would show videos and run quizzes, understanding game theory, understanding psychology and heuristic principles, things like the Solomon Asch conformity test. So I was trying to run programming chambers, and a lot of the original footage of the people playing golf on the moon and driving around in buggies was a big seminal part of that. So your starter easy question was, who was the first man on the moon? Everyone's like, yeah, I've got that one. Why haven't we been back in the last 54 years? Is that golf ball still flying, through space? And you're watching it, and then with a bit of Solomon Asch, I would have friends that we were of the same opinion, and then I would ask certain tables at different times. It's like, what do you think? And they just laugh and go, nonsense. We've never been. It's all a lie. Or the moon, the landline call to the moon. So when other people started laughing first, it's the reverse Solomon Asch. Then people, I don't want to embarrass people, but they also want to win the money. They want to win the buckets of beer as the prize. And I'm like, well, hang on, that table seems to think that we've never been to the moon. And a less well-defended narrative. I think they left themselves open on that one a bit.
Wow. So basically what you did then is that you kind of bombed the table with mates of yours who basically was just telling the truth about the moon landings and mocking it. And then the normies, for want of a better word, went along with the consensus. You changed the consensus.
So, I didn't do that as much as I would like, because it's hard to get other people all in together. And my bar kept getting raided for what I was doing, and eventually got shut down for and a lot of quite provocative posters up, it would be fair to say.
Brilliant. Brilliant. You're a man after my own heart. I used to have posters up on my classroom wall with, like the front page of the Independent with Osama bin Laden when he was, part of the brave Mujahideen and stuff. So just basically trolling with facts, really. So
humor really let us down. Humor's a great way to get through to people as well. It's a bitter pill they got to swallow. You want to make them laugh as you're damaging their ego. Yeah.
So tell us, how did your bar get shut down then? What happened?
It just kept getting raided. For no reason, but then the crowd get nervous. We went through various stages of de-release from lockdown, where people were just fined for not wearing a mask properly.
Okay.
I would then be quite aggressive and try and chase the police out, which I could get away with. I used to be quite famous over here, or at least very well known, plus a foreigner, fairly articulate, very confident, very large. But the customers not so much. So then it became problematic.
So do you think that was the attention was about you showing like the moon landing films and doing these quizzes? Do you think that was part of it, or?
No, it's definitely with regards to certain medical choices that people were perhaps inadvisedly making. And I was doing questionnaires asking people if anyone knew anyone that was injured. You know, I interviewed thousands of people,
Oh, well done. Well done.
And got through to quite a few. But my biggest problem with, I called it my kind of deprogramming sessions. The problem is it doesn't last. So if I go one-on-one with someone and their English is good, because it's only because my Bahasa and my Chinese is nowhere near good enough to speak at my level. But I can bring most people to out of cognitive dissonance within about 20 to 30 minutes, as long as they're fluent in English. But then you could meet them the next day and they'll still be wearing their mask. So it's not enough to bring that moment, but hopefully it sows the seed.
So apart from the moon landings, is there anything else that you kind of use as a truth bomb to break the program?
Yeah, lots. Fake media events are very good. Crisis actors. Most people aren't aware that crisis actors are a thing, and you can show them real world examples of crisis actors. You can show them video with the quizzes. You can show them a short news segment, and they say, "Okay, what about this?" You know, and then like, "Oh, that is interesting. Like that country. Why is this person smiling the day after his child has been murdered? You know, laughing and joking." And then pulls on a serious face. It's like, does that strike you as a little odd? You know, would this be your reaction to a bomb going off? And when you guide it to them, and you have to incentivize the questioning, that's where the prizes come in. They have to want to look. And if you do it in a jovial, funny enough way, it gets past the dread of like, hang on, is some of my reality going to come crashing down around?
Like Leo, I have to say, this is the most impressive thing that I've heard in terms of trying to get breaking through the programming by light years. So like just super well done on that. I don't know if we could maybe have another chat another time where I don't know whether you could go through some of the examples.
Some of my old posters and some of the questions.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, because we're going to finish in about 3 minutes, but maybe we could do one whenever it suits you, where we can actually just go through some of that material. It will be absolute dynamite.
Yeah, I've got a few calls. We're Thursday today, aren't we? No, Friday today.
Friday, yeah.
Maybe Friday next week.
Yeah, brilliant. Let's do that. I'll send you the link. But yeah. So is there anything else then apart from the moon landings and the crisis actors, or which events do you think? Because I've seen some of the 7/7 crisis acting, and that wasn't very good.
Yeah, well, I know one that is probably laid deeper than recent events. Climate change on younger people, very tough. I thought I would be able to get through, leveraging my credibility as working in conservation my entire life. Founding members of charities that have also called it complete nonsense. But no, that one's in really deep. So I would actually avoid that topic. It depends on the age group.
What about going through it through photosynthesis? Because I did a video about that. You know, because if you ask, I don't know whether kids are still taught photosynthesis at school. You know, so you ask them to explain the process, and then hopefully they'll understand that CO2 is like plant food. Or what gas do Dutch farmers pump into their greenhouses to make the tomatoes grow faster? But the other one as well is just... Go on, sorry, Leo.
I thought you were about to shatter my illusions there about photosynthesis. There's a lot of stuff I need to go back and check it's correct. And I thought you were about to say photosynthesis isn't real. And instead of me rejecting, I'm going to have to deep dive photosynthesis. I work on the assumption it is real, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, if Dutch farmers are pumping CO2 into greenhouses, and they've got like, even where I am in Finland, in Pori, they've got they grow tomatoes in the wintertime when it's -30. So they're using light and CO2 and water, and that's what makes the tomatoes grow. But
if we're going to time out, Nigel, which I think we are, the best antidote to fear is courage. I've seen in some of your videos you're speaking with that. We should encourage courage. That is number one.
We should talk about that as well, Leo. That's one to flesh out. But go on, carry on.
Well, just that, and I'm mindful it might just cut out in a second. Just God bless to you and anyone that happens to listen to this.
Yeah, no, I'm sure there'll be, I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 people at least. But brilliant, Leo. Thanks so much for coming on. This has been absolutely superb, and we'll speak again next Friday.
Yeah, it flew by. I look forward to it. I look forward to talking to you again. All right.
Brilliant. Thanks,
God bless.
Leo. Cheers. Bye.